Welcome to the Purpose to Create podcast with Natarsha Wright, a business podcast for photographers and creativepreneurs who want to level up as they pursue their purpose to create. Lean in as we connect, inspire, and impact you as you build and grow your business.
Hi, my name is Alicia Nicole. I am on the Purpose to Create podcast, and I am doing a takeover. So Natarsha, she's here. She's here on the podcast, but she's not hosting today. So this is definitely different for her, and it's definitely different for me because this is my very first podcast I've ever been on. So with that being said, Natarsha, I'm going to take your seat and have you introduce yourself to your own audience.
What the heck just happened? I don't even know how I got here. I know how we got here. You slid into my DMs this morning and you said, Tasha, what are your best resources for how to start a podcast? And 6 hours later, here we are recording an episode. And this is how I got kicked off my own show today, guys. So I just wanted to let you know. But no, I really thought it was important to answer this question since I get asked this a lot. So I thought this would be a fun way to turn the tables and for you guys to now leave me alone about being a guest on the show. And I can kill two birds with one stone and get it done. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Alicia. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I contacted Natarsha and I asked her what were her best resources about podcasting because I am thinking about it, but I'm not sure. But I wanted to get some insight information about it. And so she was like, oh, this is a loaded question. And, and pretty much it really is because she told me to, get my questions together. And you don't realize how loaded of a question it is until you start writing down the questions. And so I came up with a few questions. Hopefully they're helpful to you out there. Maybe you have the same questions I have, I'm sure. And so I'm just going to kind of ask her some questions. She's going to answer them for me and for you. And we're going to get started. Are you ready, Natarsha?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Okay. So basically, the first thing that came to mind when I thought about starting a podcast was I need equipment, right? So I just thought I had to have this big fancy thing going on. At first, I was like, well, maybe I could just record it in my car. But but I don't know. So maybe can you tell me what kind of equipment I would need in order for me to get started with a podcast? So when I was thinking about asking you about this podcast, right, I was driving in my car and I was like, you know what? I have an hour commute to work and I could just record in my car. But I didn't think about the equipment that I would need in order for me to start a podcast. And that actually may not be the best idea, but I wanted to know from you, what kind of equipment would I need in order for me to start a podcast?
So when I started, there was really no information out there on the internet to say that it was really overwhelming for me. And so I said, I can't do this. So let me go to Amazon and see what's the cheapest recording mic. And that's what I got. I got the cheapest recording mic. And so what I learned over these last few months is that there are like 3 categories of mics. There's a good, better, and best. And I started out with the good because I just needed to get started. But there's even a 4th category to that, which is, I like to say, the just getting started mic, which is the mic on your laptop. Like there should be no excuses why you not starting your podcast. And you can literally use your laptop like a quiet room. Create you a little sound booth, get you some egg cartons from Amazon, put them up on the wall. And I'll link all of these resources in this podcast so you can have them. But I think they're called egg cartons, but they're like the soundproof things you see when people, recording artists are recording and they put them up on the wall so it's soundproof. Get some of those, put them in a room, go in a closet and record. And even lower than that is you can record on your phone with your headsets and the built-in mic on your headset. But you're going to have to be in a quiet place. Doing it in a car is going to be too much feedback.
Yeah.
So you would probably have to sit in your closet to record if you're going to do it on the phone. And you would just upload, do the voice memo, upload it to your phone. The whole point is you just got to get started. Don't get overwhelmed by all this technical jargon. Because it overwhelmed me in the beginning when I started my podcast. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to start because this is just too much. And there's just too many options out there. And I said, I spent too much time researching, and it hindered me from moving forward. So yeah, I would just say my recommendations for like a good, better, best microphone, the good category would be a Blue Snowball Ice USB microphone. A better version of that would be a Blue Yeti microphone. I love them. I have one of those too. I have the Yeti Nano actually, and that's really good for traveling, like traveling podcasters. And then there's the best. And the best one is the one that my podcast editor recommended to me, which is called the Audio Technica AT2020 USB. And so, you know, as you grow on your podcast, of course, you want to improve the level of your audio quality, which is why you would get those types of microphones. But to just get started, start with what you have in your hand. So.
Yeah. And so then that leads, I guess, once you get all of your equipment and everything, now the next step, right, is choosing a hosting service, which I guess I was a little confused by the hosting service because I actually thought that a hosting service was like iTunes.
Yes.
Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a common misconception with a lot of people. I even thought that too when I started. I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to upload it to iTunes and I'm going to be good. But I want to take a step back because even before we get to a hosting site, uploading our podcast to a hosting site, we actually need to edit our podcast. And what that looks like is a lot of time that I was not prepared for when I started my podcast. I didn't really realize there was no really step-by-step of what I should do with a podcast. I literally, like I said, YouTube University and Google were my best friends. And I would spend hours upon hours, weekends on weekends in Starbucks, just looking at all the YouTube videos and reading all the articles I could about podcasting. And then really trying to fit in how to make it simple enough so that I can understand and so that I can get started, because I got really overwhelmed with the technical things. And so editing was one of those things that I was like, holy cow. So I had GarageBand. I was using what I had. I had GarageBand and I started to use it, and I just really wasn't feeling it. And so then someone told me about Audacity, and I started using Audacity to edit my episodes, and I absolutely loved it. So that is what I use to edit my episodes, is Audacity. So, okay, what does editing look like? Editing looks like removing the ums, the ahs, the long pauses, the mistakes, the stutters, the repetition of words and things like that in an episode. And so I would spend about 10 to 16 hours. I don't know if that is common or not, but for me, because I was super new and I had no clue, you have to start and stop and remove all of those things and make sure that the audio aligns with the next thing that is being said. Make sure it doesn't sound like it's skipping and all of those things. So I would just spend hours upon hours editing and listening to the same episode. Then once I felt like I got it at a good place, I then started listening to my episode in the places where I wanted people to hear me. So in my car, I would listen to how it would sound in my car. I would then go to Starbucks and listen to, okay, how does this sound in a coffee shop? I would be at work listening to my episodes. How does this sound when I'm at work? Because I'll put in one ear and listen to it. It's just a lot of time editing. But once you're done with the editing, you're good to go. Now we can talk about uploading to a platform.
So now we have to go to, after I've looked at my equipment and, you know, I've looked at editing or recording first and then now editing. Now I have to choose a hosting platform. And so like I thought in the beginning that was just iTunes.
Right.
But what does that look like? I don't even know what hosting service to choose. There's like so many out there.
Right. And I had a lot of confusion with that too when I started. And what I did was I went back and listened to some of my favorite podcasters, and I listened to what platforms they use to upload their episodes to. And so I did that. And a lot of podcasters I listened to, they use Libsyn. So I said, okay. But then I was like, well, I don't want to be like everybody else. I'm not going to use that one, right? And this whole comparison thing started. And I was like, I'm so new. Who cares? So then I started researching other platforms like Buzzsprout, Podbean, Simplecast, Blueberry, Anchor. And I tried Anchor first because I was like, oh, this is great. Everything's going to be mobile. It's going to be awesome. I will share this story with you that when I first recorded my first episode, I was using Anchor, and I had one of my friends test it with me. I did a mock interview with her, and I didn't like the platform. It was not easy for me to upload the audio. And at the time on Anchor, you can upload your podcast episodes to Anchor. No shade to Anchor at all, but it just was not the platform for me. So you're going to have to try different ones to see what works for you. So I ended up going with Libsyn because their platform was just user friendly. And so I just ended up using them.
Okay. And so we talked about editing, right? But I guess I want to get more into what your process looks like, I guess, for when you record in the first place, right? Like, so when you're in the process of creating, are you creating? Well, this episode was created after 6 hours of thinking, but the rest of your episodes on a daily basis, is it once a week or are you batching?
I'm actually batching my episodes. So when I started this podcast, in January of this year, I had the idea to continue to do it. Now, I'll go back that even further. Back in 2018, I had the idea to do a podcast, but I said, God, no, you're simply not telling me to do that because I don't even like to public speak, right? But if you get me one-on-one, I probably can talk your head off. But doing it in public was just not my thing because, again, of the stutters and not knowing what words to use and things like that. So I just was like, okay, I set it on the table. In January, it came back around again that it was something that I needed to do, and I did it. And so once I got that instruction, because I'd rather be on the side of doing it than being disobedient. So I said, you ain't got to tell me but once. So I was in Starbucks faithfully every weekend. They knew my name. They knew what I did. They were really excited about what I was doing. I was researching podcasts and just learning as much as I could about it. And so what I ended up doing was, after I felt comfortable enough to say, okay, I know how to edit a podcast, let me start thinking about who should be on my show. Well, back in August, God had already given me everybody who was to be on my show for the first season.
Wow.
So people always ask me, how do I come up with my guests or my topics? It literally is God saying, this is who I want you to ask to be on your show for this season. And some people don't want to be on the show, and that's totally fine. But as long as I did my part to invite the people who God said to invite on the show to have conversations with, then I'm going to keep moving forward in that. So that's how I actually pick my guests. And so I went back through that list and I added a few more names to it. I emailed everybody, let them know what I was trying to do. I said, hey, I'm about to start this podcast and I would like to know if you would be a guest. I let them know what my show's purpose was and how they fit into that. A lot of the guests that I had were photographers, wedding planners, florists, people in the creative wedding industry. And I reached out to them not for what they are known for, because there are two sides to every person, right? I'm a photographer and a business strategist. So a lot of the people I invited, they did something else. They were this, but they are really good at this. And so I wanted them for that expertise. And so a lot of people agreed. I sent them information to prepare them for the show. Again, I didn't have no guidance on how they're supposed to get ready, but because I'm type A with my organizational skills, like I'm like OCD with that, I want them to be prepared. But more importantly, I wanted them to look like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I created this PowerPoint slide and I put some guided prompts on there. I put an intro and I say, hey, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Before you come on the show, make sure you read this.
Yeah.
I called it a show guide. That's how I prepared my guests to be on the show. And so just guided questions so they knew what to expect.
Yeah.
And so I batch recorded. I was recording like 3 to 5 episodes per week for about 8 weeks.
Okay.
Some recordings would get canceled and we would reschedule. Some would fall off and things like that. And so I ended up in my first season, I ended up with 16 episodes. So it took me about 6 to 8 weeks to record 18 episodes. I batched them all. In March, I said, okay, I'm going to launch. The mistake, and if I could go back and do anything, I recorded everything, but I didn't edit everything.
Okay.
I was editing it week by week. So I launched in March, that podcast. Then I was editing every week. And that was my mistake. I should have taken the extra time to, after I recorded the episode, edit the episode.
Okay. So for you, do you feel like editing should follow right after your recording?
I believe so. In my personal opinion, I think that once you record an episode, you should edit it within like the next 3 days. Because if not, you're not going to want to deal with it at all.
Yeah.
That's what happened with me. I let them sit. I let them sit for weeks at a time until I had a batch of 16 that I needed to be like, oh, I'm launching my first episode, but I need to edit it. And so I had gotten really overwhelmed with it, working my 9 to 5. I was doing I was not sleeping. I was up 24 hours, 48 hours. I would go to work to my 9 to 5, and then I would come home, work with my clients in my photography business. And then I'd be up editing all night till it was like 6 o'clock the next morning. And I'm like, oh, I got to get to work. I need to be to work in 2 hours. So I wouldn't suggest that to anybody. I would say either pace yourself, record an episode, maybe edit it, take 7 days to edit it, because you got real life happening in between and you're not going to be able to dedicate a full hour to edit an episode. And it don't take long to edit an episode. I just didn't have the patience to sit there and listen through all the mistakes. So that's why it took me so long. That's why it took me 10 to 16 hours per episode to listen through and edit, because I get bored and I'll be like, let me go do something else. Let me go do this. I couldn't sit and focus on it. So what I did was, after about my 8th episode that I edited, I said, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So I outsourced my editing now, and I hired a podcast VA who helps me with my podcast.
That's awesome. And so pretty much that was going to be like what my next question was, but you already answered it, which is, what's your editing process like? I think that's the most thing that I'm dreading when I'm thinking about starting a podcast, because I'm just forward thinking. I want to just do it and be done.
Yep.
And so thank you for sharing that mistake with me, because now it gives me something to think about when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely give yourself some space to edit. If you're going to take on your own editing, it was just so much. But now I can edit like nobody's business. I can get through them. So I'm glad that I went through that experience, because now I can edit my own episodes quickly. I just don't have to anymore because I have a podcast VA who does that for me. So
yeah. And you mentioned like how you went through and you talked to people about what you were doing as far as your podcast. And so I have a question about that. Like, if me, like particularly me, I'm looking to start a podcast, there are so many other podcasts that are doing what I want to do, right? So how did you go about validating your podcast idea?
I didn't validate my idea. What I did was I based my podcast concept off of the gaps in my market. There was nobody doing a podcast like me, bringing on the types of guests that I was bringing on and highlighting their journey, and highlighting also the business side of things too, the tools of the trade that we needed in order to grow our business. So for me, what was missing is, you go to a conference, you invest in a conference, and then you wait another year to learn tools that you need for your business. But there were other things that I needed to be learning within that, maybe next to the next conference the following year, but it just wasn't available to me. And I'm a lifelong learner, so I always want to be learning new things. And yes, there are podcasts that talk about photography and things like that, but it wasn't talking about what we needed in the industry that I'm in the type of photography that we do with wedding professionals in the African American community. There was just not any podcast geared towards Black photographers or Black wedding professionals or things of that nature. So we have a different journey. Things are different, when we show up. And so I wanted to make sure that I talk to other photographers who look like me. But my podcast is very diverse. I want to hear from all people. But particularly, I needed to showcase to other Black photographers who are out there, because, see, when I started, there was not a lot of Black photographers in the industry, but I knew they were out there. I just didn't know where they were. So I thought it was really important for me to have this podcast that highlights African-American entrepreneurs in the wedding industry, photographers and creatives alike. So I didn't validate my idea, but what I did do was I listened to the people in the circles that I was in. I would listen to the conversations that people were having, like when I would be out and networking and things like that. Events, social media, looking through people posts and people talking about, oh, I wish there was something on this, or I wish there was something on that, or why don't we talk about this more? Or why isn't there any resources for, content marketing or personal branding or how to get started? Why is there not anybody talking about those things? And so I said, you know what? That's a gap. That's a gap that I can feel. And because I knew that I can fill that gap, because I knew a lot of people, like a lot of people on my show, I know them. And that's another question I get asked. How do you pick your guests? In addition to what I said earlier, is that I actually know these people.
Mm-hmm.
So I pick people who, I know, like, and trust, and who I know my audience know, like, and trust too. So
Yeah.
I'm just very cautious about the people that I have on a podcast that are speaking into other creative entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And so, like, if someone, let's say someone is in this different situation, I guess, and somebody like me, who maybe doesn't know, the type of people they want to have on their podcast, or even know what to really talk about, what would you say is the first step that person needs to take?
I would say first take inventory of the types of questions you had, because I created a podcast that I wish I had.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say for you, create what you wish you had. So then that's how I base my topics. Dang, I need more education in this. I need more education in that. Or like, I want to eat healthy. Well, you go look on social media and see who eats healthy. Oh, they look like they know what they're talking about. Let me send them a DM and ask them, can I send them an email, or what's their email address, and send them an email and see if they'd be interested in my show. I would say pick topics based on the things that you hear people talk about in your industry. You wish they had more of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's how I pick topics, based on what do people want more of, and how do you know what people want more of? In conversations and Facebook groups and social media, and conversation with friends, with people who are trying to achieve, like, with you, with health and fitness coaching and things of that nature. You already know the pain points of your client. Those are the things that you talk about. You talk about the pain points of your clients. You talk about the pain points of the people that you're trying to attract to your brand. You know what those pain points are, because you face those pain points too.
Right.
You're really speaking to your past self. These are the things I wish I would have had when I was going through this journey of weight loss and living a better, healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. And so after I pick what I'm going to talk about, do you script your podcast, or do you kind of just make bullet points?
I actually do guided prompts. I don't script my show at all. And I don't do bullet points. I do guided prompts. And what that looks like for me is, everybody, I'm always going to ask what their journey is. What are the challenges you face in your business? What are some strategies you can share with us as we are going in our journey? And just questions based off of the conversation that we're having. So they're very, very much guided prompts, but no scripts, no anything like that. Yeah, I don't even write notes for myself. I just really base it off the conversation, because I really like a conversational style. And so I want to remain true and organic to that. But what I do is, for me, there are two types of podcast episodes you can have. You can have a solo one, or you can have one with guests, or you can have one with three types, or one with multiple hosts. So if you did one solo, half of these things you really wouldn't have to worry about. But when you have a guest, I research my guests. So I'd already know what types of questions I want to ask them. If they were to respond to one of my prompts with something, then I already know how I want to kind of respond back to them. Or I know ways to communicate and connect with my guests, because I've researched them. I've gone on their websites, on their social medias, and I try to find ways to connect with them genuinely, and find ways to really engage them while they're on the episode.
Okay. After having a podcast for some time now, have you found there to be any downside to having a podcast as opposed to the other ways you could have done your content versus like blogging or video?
Sure. And so I would say for me, there is no downside to having a podcast. Podcasting is so much fun. Like, I really enjoy it. I'm like, I don't know what took me so long to do it. It was so good. But really, if we think about it like this, a podcast positions you in your market as a trusted authority and an expert in your field, right? And so I feel like it increases your brand awareness and connects you to a whole new market of people you would not typically have access to. And I'm exposed to a whole new market of people would never have had access to so rapidly. Less than a year in my it's been less than a year that I've had my podcast, and I'm already at almost 10,000 unique downloads.
Wow.
So that's like almost 10,000 people have listened to my podcast, and it's like so crazy to me, and I'm so grateful. I don't know how they find me most times, but I'm super grateful that people, listen. I had some loyal listeners. Shout out to my loyal listeners. And I do want to say about building up and engaging your podcast community organically. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
I don't worry about numbers. If I'm being honest with you, I don't worry about numbers.
Okay. Now you said that you didn't know what took you a while to start your podcast. Well, I can tell you, I know what's stopping me from starting a podcast is I hate the sound of my voice. How do I get over that?
You're not going to like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it's real simple. You're going to have to get over yourself, right? Like podcasting really is not about you. It's just not. It's about the people that you're serving through your podcast. You know, there were people waiting for me to show up to have the conversations with people that people wanted to have in person, but couldn't say, and only had these conversations in their head, to ask the questions that nobody else is asking, and to encourage people to do the hard things to just start. And so to know that this platform catapulted a lot of people and has been a catalyst for people to pursue their dreams or to reevaluate and take inventory of their skill set and life and things of that nature. Like, I mean, God forbid, I can't imagine if I said no and all of these people didn't get to unlock and unleash what they have inside of them. So I feel really honored to be able to be a carrier of this podcast and execute this. So that's why I say you got to get over yourself. It ain't about you. You know how many people are waiting for you, a health professional, a Black woman, to really lead the charge and say, okay, this is what I used to look like. This is how I did it. And you can do it too.
Yeah.
All people want to know is that they can do it too, but they're waiting to see somebody like you to be like, man, if Alicia can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you'll be just fine. I mean, look how I tricked you into, interviewing me for my own podcast. You sound just fine.
You set me up. Like, I definitely feel it. And I'm like, this morning had the idea of maybe I should start a podcast. And now you had me start my own unofficial.
Look at you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. One of the other things I did want to say is that before I started my podcast, I was doing IG stories and IG lives. And I did that based off a challenge that my brand coach at the time, she put out there to do a challenge for videos. And I was horrified about showing up. And she put the challenge out there and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So if you can show up online and you can talk in your stories and you can talk in your IG live, you can talk on a podcast. Because guess what? Can't nobody see you on a podcast if you're doing a solo episode. And for that matter, even when you're interviewing guests, they can't see you. So there's really nothing to be scared of.
Yeah. And I think for me, I originally said that I wanted to do video. I can turn on a video and talk, but I am very self-conscious about being on video. I don't mind it, but I am just like, I feel like I'm going to get to that process where I'm nitpicking over every little thing, kind of like when you were talking about your editing process as far as that. So what you taught me is that I'm going to have to be mindful either way, whether it's on video or it's on podcasting, that I need to learn how to release.
Yes. Yes, you do. Yeah. But the great thing about podcasting is that you can repurpose your content across platforms. And
Yeah.
so for me, I wanted to maximize my voice in the marketplace because, again, I didn't know what the potential of this podcast could be. I just knew that I wanted it to reach more creators and more photographers. And with my favorite platform, Libsyn, it allows me to do that. And I'm not getting paid for that, to say that or anything like that. But literally, I post my podcast wherever I can. And anybody that I talk to about starting a podcast, I really push out to as many platforms as possible. So, for example, like I'm currently on everything I can think of right now, except for SoundCloud, because you have to pay for that. And I wasn't trying to pay for that. But Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, Radio, YouTube, LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some, but you get the point. Like I'm everywhere that I can be. And Libsyn is that platform. I upload my audio once. It spreads across the airways for me.
So it posts on LinkedIn, like you just mentioned, or you have to go in there and do that?
No, it posts on LinkedIn for me.
That is so awesome. So are you able to then take smaller clips from that and use it and post it somewhere else to repurpose if you wanted to?
You can. You would have to edit it down to a smaller clip if you would like, and then re-upload it, but then it'll still farm it out to all the different places.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That is so awesome, because I know that probably saves a lot of time if you can think about working smarter.
Yes.
You know, and not putting too much on yourself. Have you done that though? Have you taken smaller clips and putting them in places?
I have not, because I just don't have the time to do that.
Yeah.
I just don't. I just don't. But one of the other places where I'm about to start putting them is IGTV.
Okay.
And you can repurpose this content for IGTV. You can just do the audio if you want and then put up a graphic, or you can do what we're doing now. We record on Zoom. You can you can record on QuickTime Player and do a screen record, or you can just do Skype or Zoom, whatever, and save it, because with Zoom you get the audio and the visual, and so all you do is just upload this clip. And I'll use this as an example and show a real live version of us uploading this piece of content to IGTV to show what that looks like.
Oh, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, so you can definitely repurpose this content for IGTV. Yeah, and repurpose. That's going to be what I'm going to encourage. You can break it down to smaller clips. I'm actually going to do that with this particular episode because I want to practice what I'm saying. So, and I need to learn it, because if somebody asks me, I need to be able to say, oh, this is how you can do it, type of thing.
Yeah.
So yes, I have not done it, but I will be doing it for season 3 of my podcast. I actually will be bringing folks in along for the ride for season 3. I'm doing something different with my podcast, which is I'll be doing some live recordings visually, not in person like I did back in September, but I'll be on IG. Is it IG stories? IG live, Facebook live, things like that. People who are on my newsletter, they're going to get a private invite to come and just hop online and watch me record with my guests for season 3. So they'll actually get a sneak peek of guests. That's how I engage my audience, really. They get to get exclusive content. And I just want them to be a part of the journey. I really want them, you remember the making of the band with Pete?
Yeah.
So that's what I want to do with my podcast for season 3, like the making of the podcast. So you get to see the behind the scenes, like you get to hear all of the mistakes like we did today in a podcast episode. And it's just a great thing to do. But yeah, I say all that to say, repurpose your content as many times as you can. It's totally fine.
Yeah. And so how are you getting feedback from your podcast? Is it only based on reviews? Because, like on Instagram, you got the comments, or on YouTube, you got the comments. How does that work in the podcast world?
So in the podcast world, iTunes reviews are a big deal because that's how I validate my idea. That's backwards. I know that now. I wouldn't advise for you to validate that idea that way. But on the reviews, because you get to see if people resonate with the information that you're sharing. And if they're not, your audience is going to let you know. And when they let me know, then I'm going to change it. And so what I did this season 2, is that I reached out to some loyal listeners. And how I know they're loyal listeners is because they always reposting me, always shouting me out. We engage in the DMs. Like we go back and forth, or they comment on posts. So if you comment, you active commenter, I'm always going to engage. I'm always going to reply back. And that's how I know if it's working or not. And then I send those people an email saying, hey, would you mind revamping episodes? I need to get your honest opinion. Is this information working for you? Is it not working for you? What do you want to see me do more of? What do you want to see me do less of? And I reached out to about 10 people and got a good core group of people, gave me various feedback, which was super helpful that I'm going to implement into future productions of my podcast. But so I like to be high touch approach with my audience, the ones who make themselves known. So I get people who every week we messaging each other when an episode comes on, talking about an episode or things like that. So that's how I stay in touch with my audience. And I always welcome them to give me honest feedback and also know and be okay that your show is not going to be for everybody.
Yeah, that's big.
And it's really okay because we try to do all the things for all the people and we want everybody to like it, but it's just not for everybody. And I'm really okay with that.
Yeah. So you really need to be specific on who you're trying to reach and know that, so that's really good advice.
Yeah. And then you're also going to find that you're going to attract a whole new crew of people you didn't even know was your audience.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no clue, but I'm really excited, right? Super excited just to know that you have that reach and that impact is super important for me to have the impact.
Yeah.
Because I need to know that I'm making a difference for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to know that my guests help them break through roadblocks, pain points, give them encouragement and inspiration to keep moving and know that they can do it too. Like we've all had to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. We all had to start somewhere. It does not stop us from where we're going.
Yeah, that helps. So I want to leave your viewers with something very important that they can take with them and say, this is what I need to do right now if I want to start a podcast. So what is the single most important thing that someone must do if they want to start a podcast?
I would say to focus on creating compelling content that addresses the pain points of your audience. Focus on the content. Focus on the content. If you don't know who you're trying to talk to, just get one person in mind. Focus on that one person. Whose life are you trying to change? What do they look like? How old are they? What are their job? People always talk about avatars. They're a real thing. You need to know what they look like because you need to know who you're talking to and who you're serving. And once you get that person, and you can name that person, whatever. Let's say their name is Alicia. And Alicia, she is an entrepreneur from 24 to 35. And she is at a crossroads in her business. And she needs some encouragement and inspiration to know that she's not alone in her journey. Mm-hmm. To know that if I can do it, she can do it too. And then you speak to that one person. So every time you get on this mic and you're talking, you speak to her or him.
That's so powerful. I think that's the best thing that I've learned, especially from you, learning that I need to dial deep into who my person is and give her even a name. So I think that's pretty cool to make her real. So I think that's pretty cool. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, make her real and know that she's going to show up every week because she's soaking up everything you have to say. And you're making an impact in her life.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep that, then you know that this podcast that you're doing is for a greater impact than yourself. I'm so excited. You did such a great job interviewing me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to take the mic back from you real quick. And I would like to know, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Alicia, and how the people can find you and stay connected to you after the show.
Okay, so I am Alicia Nicole. I am a holistic health coach, and I am trying to find my way of what platform I'm going to use as far as, releasing my content, whether that'll be video, podcasting, or blogging. But I don't know, you got me thinking about this podcasting, so we'll see. But you can definitely find me. I'm most active on Instagram at Alicia_Nicole. Nicole_health. And I post there. I'm working on releasing more content. You can definitely follow me. I'm super excited to be on this journey with you and be connected with you. And I guess I won't go into too much detail, but what I'll say is what led me into health coaching is that I myself lost 36 pounds on my own. And I did so without any pills, any waist trainers, and all that other stuff that people are trying to push on you. And so I just want to teach women how to do the same thing and love their bodies and be happy in their own skin. So that is the journey I'm on.
Oh, I'm so excited. I really do hope that you move forward with doing a podcast, because I feel like there are so many women who need to know that holistically they can do this.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Anything else you want to share with the guests before we go? I'm still on your time. I'm still on the takeover time. So
the one thing I definitely want to say is the only thing that came to mind for me is that I think that while you're also figuring out who you're talking to, maybe also knowing the goal of your outlet. So not only just sharing with who it is, but also knowing what you're trying to accomplish with what you're trying to do. And it sounds like you knew that when you first started your podcast. You were very intentional about the people that you wanted to reach out to. You knew you wanted it to be an interview show, and you knew that you wanted to talk about things that weren't talked about. So that is one of the biggest things that I learned during this, is to figure out what the purpose of my outlet is, regardless of what platform it is, and also to know who I'm speaking to when that time comes.
Right. And another thing I'll add to that is that don't get distracted by the small things like what platform to use, or those types of things, because those things will really hold you back from moving forward. And I will say this before we wrap up, is that the reason why I decided to go interview style is because I felt like I was not that interesting enough to do a solo show. I didn't think I was that interesting enough for people to want to listen to me for a 20, 30-minute show, and that's just being honest. And that's a fear that I have, that I'm just not interesting. And so I have to overcome that, because I know that there are some people who are really, really pushing me in my mastermind group, not to call any names, but you guys know who you are, who are pushing me to do some solo episodes. And I really, really want to. I really want to, because I'm really passionate about doing this. And I'm really passionate about people doing the hard things and showing up and getting started. But I got to do that too. And this is really hard for me. It's so hard for me. And so that one day when I do a solo episode, you're going to know I conquered my fear. And I'm not just going to do one episode. I'm going to do a series, and you're going to know that, oh, wow, like she really conquered her fear. But I wanted to share that because I know that there are some people who are struggling with doing something because they may fear that they're not interesting enough and no one wants to hear what they have to say. But you are interesting enough, and people do want to hear what you have to say. You have something in you that nobody else has. And we need to hear that. And I'm speaking to myself as I'm speaking to you, that people really do want to hear what you have to say. So don't talk yourself out of doing that. I don't know where this fear came from, but it literally has crippled me.
That's why. I think that's so inspirational that you're using your platform to be vulnerable, because it tells me to do the same thing, because so I just commend you for saying that in front of all your viewers, because now I don't have an excuse.
You don't have an excuse. You don't have an excuse, and I'm gonna stay on you. I'm gonna hold you accountable. So
yes.
All right. So that is a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for joining the Purpose to Create podcast takeover with Alicia. Thank you so much. All right, Alicia, say bye to the people.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm kind of honored to be here, just even be in front of y'all. Thank you so much. And I just appreciate everything. Thank you, Tarsh, for just being who you are and being wonderful in my life.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you did such an amazing job for your first time ever hosting a podcast.
Yes.
While you're still trying to figure out if you even want to start a podcast. So thank you so much for showing up, not just for me, but showing up for yourself.
Thank you for listening to the Purpose to Create podcast. Share, like, comment, or review this episode. Check out the show notes at www.purposetocreatepodcast.com and connect with us online at Purpose to Create.